At 14, my dad died, my stepdad took over, and my mom let him beat me, steal from me. Years later, I banned him from my wedding. My mom gave me an ultimatum: invite him or lose her too. I chose to lose them both. Hey, Reddit. I don't post much, but I've been carrying this story for years and figured it's time to get it off my chest. It's about my family, my stepdad, and how things went down around my wedding. A lot of people think they know what they do in tough situations, but when it's your own blood, it gets messy fast. Anyway, here's what happened. So I guess to really explain why my life turned into such a mess, I gotta start back when my parents split. I was 11 when my parents divorced. Not super young, but still young enough to not really get the full picture. All I knew was one day my parents were fighting a lot, and the next, my dad was moving into his own place. It sucked at first, but honestly, it wasn't the worst setup. They did shared custody, so I spent half the time with my mom and half the time with my dad. And to be fair, my dad was awesome. He wasn't the kind of dad who disappeared or stopped caring after the divorce. He was actually more present than ever. He'd show up to school events, help me with homework, take me fishing, stuff like that. So even though my family wasn't normal, I still felt like I had both parents who cared. For a while, it worked. It wasn't perfect, but I adjusted. Then my mom met him, Rick, or Ricky, as people sometimes called him. At first, he seemed fine. You know how some people come off way too nice, like almost salesman-level friendly? That was him. The first time I met him, he had this big smile plastered on his face, shook my hand like I was some business partner, and called me champ. I remember thinking, okay, this guy's trying a little too hard. It wasn't anything I could point out as bad, but something about him felt sketchy, like the friendliness was just an act, and under it, he was waiting to show who he really was. But I was just a kid, so I didn't have the guts to tell my mom, hey, I don't like this guy. Plus, she seemed happy for the first time in a while. She'd been single since the divorce, and my dad dated a little here and there, but nothing serious. When my mom smiled at Rick or laughed at his dumb jokes, I figured maybe she deserved to have someone. Still, he gave off this vibe I couldn't shake. He'd act like he was all about family, asking me about school, pretending to care about my hobbies. But it felt forced, like he was checking boxes more than actually listening. He'd ask, how was practice? Then look bored 5 seconds into my answer. I caught him once rolling his eyes when my mom wasn't looking, like me talking was a chore. To anyone outside, he probably looked like the perfect new boyfriend. But even then, little cracks showed. Like, if I sat on the couch and he wanted that spot, he wouldn't ask. He'd just stand there until I got uncomfortable enough to move. Or if I tried to talk while he and my mom were watching TV, he'd glare until I stopped. Small things, but enough that I started avoiding him whenever possible. The one saving grace was that I still had my dad. When I'd go to his house, it felt normal again. He didn't make me feel like I was in the way or taking up too much space. We'd cook dinner together, play video games, or just hang out. I leaned on him a lot more once Rick entered the picture, because being at Mom's started to feel different, less like home and more like I was a guest. I remember once telling my dad that I thought Rick was kind of fake. My dad just shrugged and said, trust your gut, kid, but don't worry, I'll always be here. And hearing that made me feel safe, like no matter what happened at Mom's, I had him to balance it out. Looking back now, I realize Rick probably hated that. I think he knew he'd never measure up to my dad, and that's why he eventually turned so hostile. But back then, it was just a gut feeling. I couldn't put words to it. I just knew something about him was off. The shift from fake friendly to openly annoyed didn't take long. Within months, his mask slipped. If I laughed too loud, he'd shush me. If I left my backpack by the door, he'd complain I was messy. If I got up at night for water, he'd ask why I was stomping around like an elephant. Basically, I could breathe wrong, and he'd act like it ruined his day. Mom didn't notice, or maybe she just ignored it. To her, Rick was sweet, dependable, the guy who stepped up after the divorce. She'd defend him if I even hinted I didn't like something he did. He's just adjusting, she'd say. Or, you need to give him a chance. So I stayed quiet. I didn't want to start drama or get stuck being the problem child. I was 12 at the time, maybe 13, and I kept thinking, well, at least I still have Dad. As long as he's around, Rick can't really ruin things. And honestly, that thought kept me sane. If only I knew what was coming. Because the day my dad passed away, Rick stopped pretending completely. I was 14 when it happened. My dad had a sudden heart issue, and just like that, he was gone. No long goodbye, no warning. One day, I was sitting on his couch playing video games while he made spaghetti, and the next day, I was standing in a funeral home, barely able to breathe. It felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. The funeral itself was rough. I thought at the very least Rick would show up to support my mom, maybe even pretend to care about me for a few hours. He didn't. He didn't even bother showing his face. He claimed he wasn't feeling well that morning, but I knew he just didn't want to be there. He stayed home while I stood over my dad's coffin trying to keep it together. Afterwards, when I got home, he didn't even say sorry. No condolences, nothing. What he did say was burned into my head forever. He looked right at me, smirked, and said, "One is gone, but one is left." I didn't even know how to respond. I just stood there staring at him, thinking maybe I misheard him, because who the hell says that to a kid who just lost his father? But no, he meant it. He said it like he was proud of it. Like my dad dying somehow cleared the way for him. That's when the mask dropped. Whatever fake friendliness he'd been carrying before was gone. He didn't care anymore. With my dad out of the picture, there was nobody left to balance things out or call him out. I was stuck under his roof, and he knew it. Within days, he started demanding I call him Dad. He'd throw it into conversations on purpose, like, "Hey, don't forget to say thanks to your dad," or "Tell your dad what you did at school today." Every time I corrected him and said, "You're not my dad," his face twisted with this anger that scared the crap out of me. One night when I pushed back, he snapped. He grabbed me by the arm, shoved me against the wall, and hit me across the face. Hard. That was the first and only time he hit me like that. But it was enough. I still remember how my ears rang after. He didn't even look guilty. He just stood there and said, "You'll learn. I'm your father now, whether you like it or not." From then on, my life at my mom's house became hell. He started controlling everything. Money? Forget it. If I wanted allowance, I had to work for it. Not regular chores like taking out the trash or mowing the lawn, but stuff like scrubbing the garage floor with a brush until my hands hurt or carrying heavy boxes just because he didn't feel like it. He'd promise me $5 and then give me nothing, saying, "That's what being a man is, doing work without whining about money." Meanwhile, he'd brag to my mom about how he was teaching me responsibility, and she bought it. Every time I complained, she told me to stop being dramatic, that Rick was just trying to help me grow up. But the worst part wasn't even the chores. It was how he talked about my dad. Anytime he saw me struggling or upset, he'd throw it in my face. "Your old man raised you soft. That's why you're weak." Or, "If I'd been around earlier, you'd know how to be a real man by now." I wanted to scream at him, but I knew it wouldn't matter. He wanted me to break, to get angry so he could twist it against me. So I just bottled it up. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and realizing I couldn't even grieve my dad properly because Rick wouldn't allow it. If I cried, he'd mock me. If I mentioned my dad's name, he'd roll his eyes or make some cruel comment. It felt like he was trying to erase my dad entirely, like the man never existed. My mom didn't make it better. She wasn't cruel the way Rick was, but she refused to stand up to him. If I told her what he said, she'd sigh and say, "He didn't mean it that way. Just let it go." Or worse, "Do what Rick says and you won't have these problems." That's what broke me the most. Not just Rick's cruelty, but the fact that my mom let it happen. She chose him over me every single time. From then on, I stopped expecting help from her. I stopped asking her to defend me. I just kept my head down, stayed quiet, and counted the days until I could get out. Because in that house, I wasn't a son anymore. I was just an inconvenience Rick tolerated until he found another way to put me down. Looking back, that was the year I stopped being a kid. I didn't have the luxury anymore. When my dad passed, he didn't just leave memories behind. He left me something tangible too. Two things, actually. The first was his motorbike. It wasn't some flashy new Harley or anything like that. It was this old but beautiful classic bike that he'd had since he was young. The kind of thing he took care of like it was a second child. Every time I was at his place, I'd watch him polish it, tune it, talk about how one day when I was old enough, it'd be mine. And the second thing was a small inheritance. My dad wasn't rich by any means, but he'd saved money for me. The catch was that it was in a trust that I wouldn't have access to until I turned 18. He set it up that way on purpose, to make sure it was protected, and I couldn't blow it all as a dumb teenager. It was his way of making sure I'd have a jump start when I became an adult. At the time, that money wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't thinking about bank accounts or trust funds. I just missed my dad. The only thing I actually wanted was that motorbike, and when I got it, I clung to it like it was all I had left of him. I'd asked Mom to bring it to the garage, and she agreed. I spent hours at the garage every day just to look at it, sometimes to polish it the way he did. It wasn't about riding it. I didn't even have a motorcycle license yet. In my state, you had to be at least 16 with an endorsement, so for me it was just about connection. It was the one piece of him I could still touch. Rick hated it. I could tell from day one. He'd make comments like, "Why's that junk taking up space?" Or, "You're too obsessed with that thing. It's just metal and wheels." But I didn't care. For me, that bike was sacred. One Saturday, about a year after my dad died, I went to the garage like usual, and the bike was gone. At first, I thought maybe my mom moved it, or Rick put it somewhere else. The title had still been under my mom's name, since I wasn't old enough to legally own it yet, so technically he had access to it sitting in her garage. I asked him straight up, "Hey, where's my bike?" And he barely looked up from the TV. "Sold it," he said, just like that. I remember my whole body going cold. I asked why, and he smirked. "Man up. It was just a piece of metal. I sold it. I lost it." I started yelling, demanding to know why he'd do that. He just laughed, said I was too attached to it, that my dad babying me was the reason I couldn't let go. He said, "You think that bike makes you a man? I'm teaching you what being a man actually is." I swear I hated him more in that moment than I thought was possible. It wasn't about the bike. It was about what it represented. He knew how much it meant to me. He knew it was one of the last things I had of my dad, and he sold it just to prove he had power over me. When my mom came home, I told her what happened, expecting her to at least be on my side for once. Instead, she said, "He's right. You can't hold on to the past forever." Like it was no big deal. Like she didn't even care. But Rick wasn't done. A couple weeks later, he started asking questions about my inheritance. He'd make comments at dinner like, "Your old man left you some money, right? What's the plan with that?" At first, I just said, "I don't know," and tried to ignore it. But he kept pushing. Finally, he cornered me one night in the kitchen and said, "Listen, I'm your father now. What's yours is mine. That money shouldn't just sit there when we got bills to pay." I told him he couldn't touch it, that it was in a trust until I turned 18. The bank managed it directly, and my mom didn't have access either, so it was completely locked down. His face dropped, and for a second, I thought he might hit me again. Instead, he clenched his jaw and muttered, "Figures your old man didn't trust anyone but himself." Then he stormed out. That didn't stop him from trying, though. He started pressuring my mom about it. I overheard them arguing one night when I was supposed to be asleep. He said stuff like, "If you loved me, you'd find a way to use that money for the house." And she said, "It's locked up, there's nothing I can do." But the part that stuck with me was when she added, "Besides, it's for him. It's what his dad wanted." Rick's response, "Well, his dad isn't here, is he?" "I am. That makes it mine." And I laid in bed that night staring at the ceiling, fists clenched, and realized this man wasn't just trying to replace my dad, he was trying to erase him. The motorbike was gone. He couldn't touch the trust money, but he was obsessed with it anyway. He'd stolen my allowance, my peace, my mom's loyalty, and now he was going after my dad's last gift to me. After that, I stopped talking to him unless I had to. I avoided him as much as possible, spent most of my time in my room, and counted down the years until I'd turn 18 and finally get access to the money my dad left me. That inheritance wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about beating Rick. It was proof my dad thought of me, cared about me, and trusted me with something. Proof Rick could never take away, no matter how hard he tried. The bike was gone, but the trust kept me going. Every time Rick mocked me, every time he called me weak or soft, every time he demanded I call him dad, I thought about that money sitting there, waiting for me. Not for him, me. And that was the thing Rick could never stand. He could bully me. He could steal from me. He could try to rewrite the story of who raised me. But in the end, he'd never be my father. My dad had made sure of that. When I turned 18, I finally got access to the inheritance money. It wasn't some insane fortune, but it was good enough to cover a good part of my college tuition and keep me from needing to depend on Rick for a dime. That alone felt like freedom. I applied to schools out of state, just a couple hours over the border, so I wouldn't have to see him much. When the acceptance letter came, I swear I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. Leaving for college was the single greatest relief of my life. Packing up my stuff, loading it into my beat-up car, and pulling out of that driveway, I can still remember the exact weight lifting off my shoulders. Rick tried to act like he was in charge of the whole send-off, giving me man-to-man advice. "Don't waste that money. Don't come crawling back. Don't forget who raised you." He said that last part looking me dead in the eye. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I'd break a tooth, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of responding. The truth was, I couldn't wait to never see his face again. But of course, Rick didn't just vanish from my life. He found ways to creep back in, even when I wasn't under his roof. He started spreading this fake story, to extended family, neighbors, even old family friends, that he was the one who stepped up after my dad died, that he was the one who raised me into the man I'd become. The first time I heard about it was from an aunt who visited campus and said, "Rick told us how proud he is of you, how he raised you right after your dad passed." I nearly choked on my coffee. Raised me? This guy mocked my dad's death, sold my bike, beat me, and stole my allowance. Now he was out here playing hero? I wanted to scream, but I just smiled and changed the subject. Inside, I was boiling. It got worse when I went home for holidays. My mom, still wrapped around his finger, kept pushing me to respect him. She'd say things like, "He's your stepdad. You should be grateful he was there for you." Or, "It wouldn't hurt to call him once in a while." Every time I reminded her what he'd actually done to me, she'd brush it off with excuses. "He didn't mean it like that." Or, "You can't live in the past forever." I stopped arguing and just went silent. It was easier than yelling into a brick wall. But that silence made me angrier at myself. Rick, meanwhile, never gave up his obsession with forcing me to call him dad, even when I was in college. He'd send me random texts like, "Don't forget who your father is." Or when I visited home, he'd make a scene in front of people saying things like, "Tell your dad about your finances." He knew it got under my skin, and that's why he did it. By the time I was 21, the pressure had built so high I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. I'd been dating Sarah for about a year, and she convinced me to stop bottling everything up. She said, "You need to say it to his face at least once. Otherwise, he'll never stop." So one Christmas, I snapped. We were all at the dinner table, Rick running his mouth about how kids these days don't know the value of hard work. And then he pointed at me and said, "Luckily, I taught this one right." I put my fork down and said, "No, you didn't teach me anything. You stole from me. You hit me. You mocked my dad. You tried to erase him. You didn't raise me. You ruined my childhood." The room went dead silent. My mom looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Rick turned red, then purple. He started yelling, calling me ungrateful, saying I was disrespecting the man who put food on my table. I stood up, hands shaking, and said, "You're not my father. You never were. And if I never see you again, it'll still be too soon." I left the house that night and didn't look back. From then on, I only saw my mom separately. We'd meet at restaurants, coffee shops, anywhere but that house. She still tried to convince me to fix things with him, but I shut it down every time. If Rick was around, I wasn't. Period. It wasn't easy. I lost touch with a lot of relatives who bought into his fake image. To them, he was the stepdad who stepped up, the guy who took care of the widow and the kid. I was just the angry son who didn't appreciate it. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I had Sarah, my friends, and a life I was building far away from Rick's poison. Deep down, I knew one day all that bottled up history was going to explode again. I just didn't know when. Turns out, the when showed up around the happiest time of my life. I'd been with Sarah, my high school sweetheart, for years. So I proposed. Simple, no fireworks or grand stunts, just us at the park where we used to hang out when we were kids. She said yes before I even finished asking. Planning the wedding was exciting at first. Sarah and I agreed early on. Small, private, only the people we actually cared about. Which meant my mom was invited. Rick was not. That wasn't even up for discussion. Sarah knew my history with him, and she didn't want a single ounce of stress on our day. I didn't either. When my mom got her invite, I could see the hesitation in her eyes before she even spoke. She looked down at the envelope and said, "And Rick?" I said flatly, "No, Rick. This is my wedding, not his show." She went quiet for a long second and then nodded, but I knew what was coming. Sure enough, a week later, she called me. Her voice had that tone I recognized from my teen years, the one she used when she was about to guilt trip me. She said, "If Rick isn't invited, I won't come either. He's my husband, and it would be insulting to exclude him." I swear, I almost dropped my phone. After everything, after all the times she'd watched him tear me down, after the bike, after him mocking Dad's death, even after that Christmas blow-up, she still put him first. I told her, "Then don't come. I'm not budging on this." That should have been the end of it. But of course, Rick wasn't going to let it drop. He saw my wedding as another opportunity to mess with me. Within days, I started getting calls from relatives, aunts, uncles, even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them repeating the same line, almost word for word. "Your mom raised you after your dad died. You owe her. You're being unfair. Rick's done a lot for you." It was like he'd gone down the family phone tree and handed everyone the same script. I could practically hear his voice behind their words. The man had always been manipulative, but now he was running a full-blown campaign to turn people against me. One cousin actually said, Come on, dude, you'd be nothing without him. He gave you a roof over your head. That nearly made me laugh out loud. Yeah, a roof where he beat me, stole my allowance, and sold my dad's motorbike out from under me. Some gift. But the lowest blow came when Sarah's mom pulled us aside one evening. She looked uncomfortable and said, I got a call from Rick. He somehow dug up my number through the family grapevine, probably Facebook or a relative, and told me you've been unstable, that you hold grudges, and that Sarah needs to think twice before marrying into that kind of bitterness. My blood went ice cold. It was one thing to trash me to my relatives, but going after Sarah's family? That was crossing a whole different line. Luckily, Sarah's mom had already heard enough about him from me and Sarah to know what was really going on. She told him off over the phone, but she wanted me to know just how far he was willing to go. And honestly, that was when I stopped feeling any hesitation about cutting him and my mom out completely. If my own mother was choosing a guy like that over me, then fine. But I wasn't going to let him poison my marriage before it even started. She stayed quiet through most of it. I could tell she wanted to defend him, but for once, maybe the weight of it all shut her up. At the end, she called me, and all she said was, I just wish you'd see how much he's tried. That broke something in me. I said, the only thing he's tried is ruining me, and you've let him. Every single time. Then I hung up. From that point forward, I knew it was going to be a battle right up to the wedding day. But I also knew something else. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was an adult now, with my own life, my own partner, and a family I was building that had nothing to do with him. If he wanted a war, fine. But this was my turf now, and I wasn't backing down. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like walking through a minefield. I ignored Rick's calls, dodged relatives repeating his lines, and focused on the details with Sarah. I thought maybe, just maybe, my mom would finally drop it and show up quietly. Instead, she came to my place a few days before the wedding, without him. When I opened the door, I could tell she was carrying something heavy. Not bags, not boxes, just that look. The one where she's rehearsed a speech in her head and is determined to get it out no matter what. I stepped aside and let her in, because she's still my mom, even if she's been failing me my whole life. We sat at the table. She didn't waste time. I don't want to fight with you, she started, but you're making a mistake. I leaned back, arms crossed. The mistake would be letting him anywhere near my wedding. That was all it took. She jumped into defense mode, just like she always had. Rick's not the monster you think he is. He gets frustrated sometimes. You know he didn't mean half the things he said. I laughed, bitter. He didn't mean it when he told me one's gone but one's left? He didn't mean it when he smacked me for not calling him dad? Didn't mean it when he sold my motorbike? Or when he kept pushing for my inheritance? Which part am I supposed to believe was an accident? Her eyes darted away, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. She muttered, You're exaggerating. He was trying to teach you discipline. And the bike, it was old. We needed the money. I slammed my hand on the table before I could stop myself. No, that wasn't discipline. That was him beating down a kid because he couldn't stand competition from a dead man. And the bike wasn't yours to sell. It was Dad's gift to me. He destroyed the last piece of him I had left. Her voice sharpened. You think life's that simple? Bills don't pay themselves. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made. I stared at her. The only sacrifice made in that house was me. Over and over again. You stood there and watched him ruin me because you were too scared to be alone. That hit. I could see it land. Her face twisted, and for the first time the mask slipped. The soft guilt act vanished. She snapped, You're just like your father, she spat. Stubborn, selfish, always thinking you know better than everyone else. Do you think it was easy for me? He left me to raise you alone, and Rick stepped up. He was there when nobody else was. And this is how you repay us? Her words were like daggers, but I kept my voice calm. Dad didn't leave. He died. And Rick didn't step up. He tore me down. Big difference. She leaned forward, her tone rising. You never wanted me to be happy. That's what this is about, isn't it? You couldn't stand seeing me move on, so you've hated him from day one. I shook my head. I gave him a chance. I was a kid. He was fake friendly at first, and I tried. But the second Dad was gone, he showed who he really was. And you chose him every single time. She slammed her palm on the table. Because he's my husband. Don't you understand that? He's my partner, my life, and if you respected me, you'd respect him. I felt something inside me go quiet. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. If respecting you means forgiving the man who mocked my father's death, hit me, stole from me, and humiliated me for years, then I guess I don't respect you. And if you choose him, you lose me too. Simple as that. The room went silent. For once, she had no comeback ready. Her chest was heaving, her eyes shiny, but not with compassion, with rage. She stood up fast, chair screeching against the floor, and grabbed her purse. "You'll regret this," she said, pointing a finger at me. "One day you'll see he was right all along." I walked her to the door without saying another word. As she stormed out, I realized something. That was the first time I'd ever told her point blank that I wouldn't bend for her or Rick again. Not half-truths, not silence, just the full reality. The door clicked shut, and I stood there for a long time, staring at it. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. She'd made her choice, like she always did, and for once I'd made mine. Sarah came out from the other room, eyes wide. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, better than I've ever been." Because now, no matter what happened on the wedding day, I knew exactly where I stood. Rick wasn't going to be there. If my mom chose to stay with him, she wasn't going to be there either. And maybe it hurt, but it also felt like cutting off a chain I'd been dragging for years. And I knew one thing for sure. When I walked down that aisle, it would be on my terms. The wedding day came faster than I expected. I was standing in front of the mirror, tying my tie with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't nerves about marrying Sarah. I was more than ready for that. It was the weight of everything else. The years of garbage I'd carried from Rick and my mom, all leading to this moment. The ceremony itself was perfect. For once, there wasn't a shadow hanging over me. No Rick, no arguments, no manipulation. Just her, smiling at me like I was the only person in the room. After we said our vows, I felt like I'd stepped into a different life. I gave a short speech, thanking the people who had truly supported us. My mom's name never left my mouth. Neither did Rick's. For a while, I thought maybe, finally, I'd get one day free from their drama. But of course, life never makes it that easy. It was late, near the end of the night. Guests were leaving, Sarah was off talking to her friends, and I was sitting outside with a drink in my hand when I saw her. My mom. She wasn't dressed up for a wedding. No makeup, no smile. Just a tired woman standing by herself, wringing her hands. At first, I thought she'd worked up the nerve to sneak in with Rick behind her, but then I realized he wasn't there. She walked over, slow, like every step hurt, and when she pulled her sleeve back to wipe her eyes, I noticed the mark on her arm, a dark bruise. "I'm sorry to just show up," she said quietly, almost trembling, "but I didn't know where else to go." I stared at her, numb. What happened? She sat down beside me, staring at the ground. "Rick and I had a fight. A big one. He didn't like me arguing with him about you anymore. He said I embarrassed him. He told me to get out." Her voice cracked. "He put his hands on me. Then he said I was nothing without him." For a second, I didn't know what to say. This was the moment younger me used to dream about. Her finally admitting Rick wasn't the man she thought he was. But seeing her sitting there, bruised, asking for sympathy, I didn't feel joy. I just felt exhausted. "I don't have anyone," she whispered. "You're all I've got, and I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I see it now. I should have protected you. I should have chosen you." Her words hung heavy in the air, and maybe 5, 10 years ago I would have cracked. Maybe I would have pulled her into a hug and said, "It's okay, Mom. I forgive you." I'm but standing there, in the suit I wore to marry the love of my life, surrounded by people who truly supported me, I realized I didn't owe her that. Not anymore. I looked her dead in the eye. "No, you don't get to say that now. You had years. You had every chance to stand up for me, to pick me over him, and every time you picked Rick. Now that he's thrown you away, suddenly you remember I exist? That's not love. That's convenience." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "You let him hit me. You let him mock Dad's death. You let him sell the only thing I had left of him. You sat there while he tried to erase him from my life. And when I begged you to see it, you told me to shut up and respect him. You chose him, Mom. Every single time." She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away. My voice came out steady, almost cold. "You don't get to fall back on me now. I don't forgive you. Not for this. Not for all those years. I built my life without you, and I'm not letting you drag me back into that hell just because he finally showed you his true colors." Her face crumpled like I'd just punched her in the chest. She tried again, softer this time. "I'm sorry. I just want another chance." I stood up, straightened my jacket, and shook my head. "I gave you chances. More than you ever gave me. I'm done, Mom. I can't carry this anymore." For a moment, she just sat there, shoulders shaking, and then she stood too. She didn't say another word. She walked off into the night, small and broken, and for once I didn't chase after her. When I turned back toward the hall, Sarah was standing by the door watching. She didn't ask what happened, didn't push me to explain. She just slipped her hand into mine and said, "Ready to go home?" I nodded. "Yeah, let's go." As we walked out together, I realized something. My dad's death had left this huge hole in my life, and Rick had spent years trying to fill it with misery. My mom let him, but here I was, married to someone who truly saw me, building a future where they had no power anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them regret. It was about finally choosing myself. And for the first time since I was a kid, I felt free. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.